So the next thing I want to talk about with you guys is how to wrap up your work. Because it's very important that after you make your objects, that you keep them wrapped in plastic. If they're not wrapped in plastic, then what can essentially happen is that they're going to dry out over time. Just like the clay bag, like we talked about, the clay drying out, if it's being the big chunk being left out, the same thing is going to happen to the work that you make. So you need to be very careful. You need to make sure that you let it sit out for a short period of time to get to a point where it gets to a little bit more of a serviceable or a harder working temperature, or not temperature, texture, and that way we can add things to it. I'm going to be showing you guys another video here that's going to show you how to add a foot onto a pinch pot if you want to add a foot. If you notice from the examples that I've shown, there are, for the series of 3, both of them that are listed there, if I remember right, both of them do not have a foot on the bottom of them. But where I'm going to show you guys how to make a foot on the bottom of them. So if you want to end up using these as utilitarian bowls or little small containers that you can put stuff in, and you want it to sit flat on the table without just flattening the base that's right here, what we can do is we can actually add something to it, and I'm going to show you how to do that by using something that we call in ceramics called a coil. And I'm going to be giving you guys a demonstration on that. It's going to be a kind of what I call a coil pinch foot, essentially. So we'll start out with a coil, and then we're going to pinch it up into a taller foot from where it stands. So there's a lot of different ways that you can add feet onto it, and I'll probably give you a couple of different ideas of how to do that as well, depending on how you want to have a foot on your object. But when we place those foots on an object, we have to make sure that this clay becomes a little bit stiffer than when we originally make our object. First, we're going to be talking about how to wrap up this object, and I'm going to show you guys how to wrap up this object using a piece of dry cleaner plastic. And the dry cleaner plastic, I've actually already kind of opened it up. So, normally the dry cleaner plastic comes and it's in like a tube essentially that goes around the article of clothing that you got from the dry cleaner. But what I've actually done to this is I've opened that dry cleaner plastic up so it's a single layer of plastic. You can use a double layer, that's fine. You don't have to do this, but sometimes you get these little seams that are here, and you can actually just kind of rip that seam and open it up even further. So I'm going to do that to this one as well. So I've got a nice flat piece, like so, right? Excellent. Now, obviously, if you have children around your house, you want to be very careful about using this dry cleaner plastic or any plastics. Don't leave them sitting around. Kind of get them up and out of the way. Put them into a bag or a cupboard or something so that your kids can't get to them, because plastic can be dangerous. Normally, if we're in the studio, I wouldn't even mention this. But this is a pretty huge piece of plastic, and that's a pretty small piece of clay that I've got going on there. You have two options. You can leave it as this large piece of plastic and use it as a big piece, or you can cut it up into smaller pieces. Sometimes what I end up doing is I end up just kind of going for the half. And when you do this, you can just take this and kind of just use your thumbs and your fingers to kind of start to get a little bit of a rip going. And then if you just keep it ripping in one direction, it tends to rip very straight. I mean, look at how straight that rip ended up being, right? And that's because, on a microscopic level, there's some sort of crazy stuff going on with this plastic. I don't know. I'm not into that material. I'm into clay. All right. So now I've got this smaller piece, and what I want to do is, if I left this thing drying and I left it sitting on this piece of cardboard, the cardboard is actually going to start to take moisture out of the clay. Or if I'm doing it on a regular board, like I've got this board right here, right? If it sits on this board, the board will actually kind of suck some of that moisture out of the clay, and it'll cause my piece to dry faster. I've actually let this sit out for a little bit of time. A lot of students ask me this question. They say, well, Brian, how long do I have to leave my clay out in order for it to get to that level of dryness that we're looking for? There's no answer to that question because it all depends on weather. It depends on how much air is moving through wherever it is that you have your stuff. Depends on if you have a fan on that's in the house. For example, I have a ceiling fan that's on right now, so it's going to dry out a little bit quicker. I live in a climate. I'm kind of near the beach, and so I have a little bit more moisture in the air. And if you guys are in Riverside, and then you're going to get it drying out a bit quicker, okay? Because the air is a bit drier out there. So what you want to make sure that you do is you want to make sure that you wrap this thing up and just check it often, right? So if you're not going to wrap it up, you're leaving it out to get to a different dryness level, then what you're going to want to do is you're just going to want to check on it often. And if you've got air circulating around, sometimes I come and I just kind of move it a little bit, kind of spin it, give it a little spin, and then it'll end up drying nice and even. I would say I left this thing out for maybe about an hour and a half, I would say, before I covered it up before. It's already been covered up, but I'm going to recover it up for you guys. And so when you cover it up, to make sure that everything stays the same, the way that you want it, you need to make sure that you have plastic down on whatever it is that you're going to be putting this object on, okay? It doesn't have to be this, it can maybe be this. Maybe you're just storing everything on a larger board like so. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this plastic and set it down on the table or on the, the board that I'm going to be putting it on. Then I'm going to take my object and I'm going to set it on top of the plastic. And then I'm going to take this plastic and I'm going to wrap it up, right? There's not really any specific way that you have to wrap it up, but what I like to do is kind of wrap it up in a couple of different directions. And then any of this excess stuff, when I take this and put it back onto my board, I can kind of tuck it underneath, all right, and put it onto my board or my piece of cardboard in this case, all right. Kind of tuck that stuff underneath there, and if it's tucked up underneath like that, then it can't come undone, right, and it'll stay nice and covered while you're doing this. So that is how we cover our work. We always want to cover it having plastic on the bottom. One of the exceptions might be is that potentially maybe you have little squares of plastic or little circles of plastic or something like that that you can end up putting your work on and then putting the wrapping over top of it. As long as the clay is not touching whatever it is, whatever that porous surface is, whether or not it's cardboard or if it's a piece of wood, those are the things we want to be careful of. Some pieces of wood, if you get them from Home Depot, some of them have like a plastic laminate layer on them, and those you could put your work directly onto that plastic laminate layer because it's not going to absorb that moisture. So that's something that's really important to think about as well. If you have any questions, again, feel free, send me a message. We're going to have a discussion associated with this pinch pot assignment for anybody who has any questions about that, and then also to kind of post your work as you're making your work each one of our class sessions. So for example, today's Monday. On Wednesday, I want you guys to go ahead and put that an image up there. And then for those of you guys that are in the Thursday class, same thing. You know, Thursday we'll start making. You're going to start making stuff over the week, and then on Thursday, I want you guys to post an image to the discussion. And then students, other students, I want people to make some comments on people's discussions. Okay, you have to make some comments on people's posts, on people's work. The specifics will be in the discussion assignment, so you can see what that's all about. And then at the very end of this, when before the due date, you're going to be actually, when you're finished with your object, your relationship set of three, or at least three, right? It doesn't have to just be three; it can be more than three, right? But three is the minimum. Those three need to relate to one another. It can be a set of 5, it can be a set of 6, or 6 that relate to one another. Whatever number it is that you want to come up with, that's fine with me. But 3 is the minimum. So you're going to be posting those 3, relationship pieces in the area where it says to turn that in that assignment area that's connected to the module. And then with your deconstruction, reconstruction, you're going to do the same. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the deconstruction reconstruction in another video where we'll be talking about dryness levels and what dryness levels mean in ceramics and what the names of them are. So please look for that video as well connected to this module. Thanks so much, guys.